Hello, this is Sharif Magimbe, and working as OpenMRS Quality Assurance Fellow, and my mentor is Joseph Kawesi. We're going to look at debugging techniques in Eclipse IDE. Ideally, this work is going to be for OpenMRS Quality Assurance support team, and anyone working on Selenium automation tests. This is going to be of importance. We're going to look deeply about examples of Java debugging tips that we are going to be using. We have use of conditional breakpoints. We have use of exceptional breakpoints. We have use of waypoints, use of step filters. Namely, we have StepIn, StepOver, and StepReturn. For this video, we're going to have the last three tips that are going to be looked into and how are they of importance, which is StepIn, StepOver, and StepReturn. So for that, you're going to use Selenium for this screencast. Like I said, it's a part of OpenMRS contribution support, and those we're focusing on in contribution support is Selenium for Java. I say Selenium for Java because there's another version of Selenium, which is Selenium for Python, but for OpenMRS, we are dealing with Selenium for Java. Another tool is Cypress. Cypress is being used as a micro front ends, and we have other package for the Cypress in where we package them, which is in reference application distro and QA framework for OpenMRS. We have also Cucumber framework, which is going to help us to in automation end-to-end testing. It is very helpful. And I forgot to add Gherkin syntax, which is also helping us to write the steps definition and feature files. With that, let's dive into the video and we'll look through StepIn, StepOver, and StepReturn. Hi. We're going to debug, and then within this debugging tips, we're going to be looking into 3 or 4 debugging tips and techniques while we are writing, while we're debugging our Selenium code. This is not actually part of the Selenium code, but it is the same approach where we are debugging the real Java code. I have picked my line of choice, which is line 64. I already added the breakpoint. So a breakpoint is just you're just adding. You're adding a breaker. You're telling the execution program to stop there until you do something about your code. So you're saying execute all the program, all the lines, but when you reach here, stop, wait for me, and I have something to do with this line of code. So that's where you start to debug from. So debugging specifically, you're looking into the code. You're looking into your code or the already written code, not the problems that come within maybe the version of maybe Selenium you're working on, or the version of JUnit, or the version of Java library. No, you're only looking into the code that you already written. You're looking into the program execution. How does the code work, and how can we improve it? That's what we're going to be looking into. So on line 64, we have a method reference called login page and another method reference called login as a nonce. So ideally, login as a nonce, if I want to explain a little bit of these methods. So login as a nonce comes from reference application test base. So if I come and set test base and I find that method, so this is the method that is being called here, that's being created. It's a method name. So this becomes a method name when it is in its original class, and it becomes a method reference. These are just Java basic related languages or references. So it becomes login as a page, login, go to login page, it becomes a method reference. So this is a method that it's a login method, login page, and it has a method here. They're creating an object of login page, get login, and there's a response, and this response creates a client builder, and it has the target comes from test.property file. It gets an instance of a web URL, which is what we are using. I have my server running, and basically the web URL they're talking of is the URL, which is OpenMRS instance. And then an int of stated responses, they're just throwing server error exceptions. And then at the end, it gets the phrase and status. Then this one goes back to the login page. It waits for the login and then navigate to login page, then refresh back, and then returns the login page. So idea, this method is, at the end of the day, it returns us to the login page. That's what this method does. And you can see that the return type is a login and the access modifier is public. So that's what this method does. So we are using it here, and we are going to debug our method. What you're going to debug is you're going to verify whether NAS modules are viable on homepage. At the end of the day, you're supposed to say find patient app present, and we are supposed to see active present visits and appointment scheduling are present, whether they are present on the homepage, and capture vitals if these apps are present on the homepage. Okay, so I'm going to run this program in debug mode. So with that, I can right click on the project and I run a debug as debug configuration, or you can just directly, if you had run this program before, you can, as you see, run debug login test. So before that, these methods cannot be active until you run this program in debug mode. We are going to look into StepOver and StepReturn. Then at the end, we are going to look through terminate, resume, or suspend if time allows. Okay, with that, let me run this in debug mode. Let me run. So running this in debug mode, I right click on the project at debuggers configuration. Then you can see I'm running on JNet 5. That's the basic version of JNet that you're running in OpenMRS, and I'll run as debug. So if we debug, we wait until our debug point is being hit. So you can see that my server is running, and there we have seen our debug point is being hit on line 64. So I did not explain what login nonce comes from. So login nonce comes from login page. You can see it comes from login page. You can go there for a bit and then login page. So login page, there's a method called login as nonce. It just returns login, and with nonce as a username and nonce as a password. They have been created here. Nonce with the static final strings here. So it just returns these two attributes, which is nonce username and nonce password. Okay, so I'm going to, so we are here on line 64. So I'm going to first explain what StepOver does, and then I'm going to also explain what StepIn does, and then we'll look into StepReturn. So starting with StepOver. So when you are executing these programs line per line, we want to basically understand what does this line do and what is the return type. The return type within that, we saw that it's a login page, and the nonce is basically it returns the passwords of login as nonce and the password for nonce and the username. So ideally, we are looking into line per line. So when we step over, we want to see whether this line is being executed. So there is an assumption whether the line is not going to be executed. That's when you actually need to track what causes the error of the program or the problem. So I'm going to step into, so what what step over will tell me is that line 64 is going to be executed, and then it goes to line 65. That's it. So when you press step over, where the bug is being stop paused, that line is going to be executed, and then it goes to the next line. So I'm going to step over once, then we wait until another pause being hit by the debugger. So we can see that it have executed line 64 and then have gone to line 65. When we come back to our instance, we can as well see that nonce is being logged in, as you can see, login as nonce. Even here you can see that nonce is being logged in, just to be specific. And we have find app record, activist, appointment scheduling. That can be like our console. We are now trying to handle two things. We are having, okay, we can track these two ways. One is seeing whether our methods are correct. We have find patient record, activist, appointment schedule. When we come back to our asserts, we can see that find patient app, activists, appointment schedule, and capture vitals. So we are on the way. So with that, we have seen that step over, what it does, it executes where the breakpoint is stopped, and then it continues to the next line. You can as well tell from the right hand side of the of our of our window that the topmost line, that which is on line 65. You can also as well tell that that's where our program is being paused. Then if I step over again, as you have seen that step over, I actually added here a print line statement saying some statements to confirm program execution of login as nonce. This line 65. So we have seen that we can actually tell that our line has been executed. The line 65 have been executed, and we are on line 66. And we can see that our program has like the printer statement is being printed on the console. So using printern statements are good, but on the other hand are not good, because you cannot tell when we're going to look into step into. You cannot tell what the program. Okay, you can tell, but using printern statements, they are just helping you to see whether this line has been hit, but pausing it back can also work. So step over, it only executes line per line. Step over again, step over again, then I step over again, step over again, and then I step over again. So we have seen that our program is being hit, and then we can as well tell whether our test has been passed for only verify nonce modules available on home page. Then we can wait for the server to run, and then we see whether our they're still running. So we need to give it some time. Then we can go to step into step over, sorry, step into, sorry. Okay. So as we are waiting for the server to run, good. So it have run, but it is throwing this exception, which is not the ideal here. But since we have seen that, we can go and see what the step into and step return does. We've learned that step into, step over, sorry, only executes line per line. Line per line. I'm going to pause, and then I pause. I also quit that, please. And make sure everything is steady. Then I debug as this time. I can use this button. So we are going to look what does step into does for this time. Okay, we already hit a breakpoint, so we are on line 64, as you can see. So for this time round, let's try to talk about step into. So for the step into, its use case will always look through the methods. So for this line 64, we have line 64, there are go to login page and go to login as a none. So when we step into, it is going to take us to where this method has been called. So when you don't have the source page or the source file of these methods, you're going to first add them in your project. So what it does, it is going to look through this method, go to login as, and so this comes into time when you want to check what does this method does, and let's take for example that it have thrown an exception and you want to go to deeply understand what this method is doing. So for that, you are going to use step into. So step into, when we're going to press step into for once, which is also F5 on your keyboard. So when I press step into, it did not do any action. Rather, the action it did took me to login, go to login page. as you can see, uh, our tracker of a breakpoint is being hit on line 235. So that's where we are. This is where the debugger point have paused down. So we can see that it is a method name got login page, and that's what we've used as a method reference here in our login test class. So it has been called from test base class. Test base comes from UI test framework. So I already explained this line what it does. It logs in. They created an object of login page, and there is a response, and the response creates a new client, and the new client targets test properties and gets a web URL, which is the instance that is running. Tap the path that gets a page URL, which is the URL that picks it from here, and then it gets request a get. So they have an exception of an integer 400 and 599, which throws server error exception in case a server returns an error. So this is where it comes from. And then this line 248 goes back to login page. It waits for login. So let's try to look through what StepReturn does. It's very simple and very stable. I can execute this program again. So ideally, we saw as we're waiting, we saw that StepIn to StepOver runs line per line, line per line, line per line. If we have stepped into it runs line per line. Then step into StepOver, for it goes through each method reference. Method reference, these are methods that are being concatenated, they're being added onto each method. Take for example .get, .goto, .something, like these are methods that are being concatenated, they are being added on top of each method. So that for the step over, it goes through each method reference. I'm going to step over again into line 64. Our breakpoint is being hit on line 64 again. So this time you're going to deal with the step return, and then you can finish the program. You have seen that it is on line 64 here on the first line, and so if I step into, like I said, it goes through got login as a login page first, and then you execute, you run all these lines of code. When you come back out of this line, it goes to again and run got login as a page. Then you go there, login as a page, do the same. I'm going to for when I'm here, I'm going to say, so I'm going to use step return. So what step returns does, we are on line 223. So it is going to take me back where I had where it is coming from. So when I step return, which is F7, then we can wait. It have put us back to line 64. So we can also see that it is on line 64. Okay, I'm going to step into again. So you can see that for this time round, when I stepped into, it have returned back. So it have returned back for the first time, and then when I stepped into, it goes to the next execution, the next reference, method reference. So in our mind, we were supposed, it's as if we are supposed to see that this execution is going to take us back to go to login as a page, but that's not the idea. So the idea is that it will, when you step return from the other method, it is going to be as if you are no longer interested in running that code. So it goes back and executes the next method reference. So we've seen that when we stepped into it, have put us back to login as a page. When we step, so okay, yeah, we can step return again. It is going back to, it is putting us back to the where we started from. Okay, so that's it. The step return will only take you back to where you had uh, pressed step into where the back point is. So that's the idea. That's the logic of step return. So it returns back to where you're coming from. Okay, I'm hoping that this is going to be very important for us when we are trying to debug our code. Debugging is ideally the best approach that you can write code and clean code. It's the best thing that you can, the best technique that you can use while you're working on different tasks, whether either it is the raw Java, whether it is automations, but for this time around we are automating and we can see the execution of our program workflow. And since these are, we are trying to debug the pages, we can also try to see what's happening into our instances. We can pause them, we can wait for them, they can wait for us. So this is a very important technique, especially in quality assurance. When you're working on increasing our skills, this is very important. I'm going to, so for this button, it will terminate the whole project and we can resume. So resume will rerun all the program. It reruns back all the program. Suppose you have many, more than one breakpoints. For resume, if you have a breakpoint on line 65 and you resume it, so what the JVM does, it will run all the programs without the breakpoints. So this one will terminate the program, and like I said, will restart the entire program workflow. So for that, I'm going to execute this because we've already finished. We've learned step into that. It is maybe for summarizing, that step into will look through each line by line, and if they are of method references, they are going to be it's where we are going to have this the step into active. So let's take, for example, maybe something small. We have we say test base. This is just an example. Then test base. Sorry, test base equals to. Suppose we have. You can import this. Control Shift or I can say import. So this is not going to be executed. This is not going to be pushed to the GitHub. This is an example. So suppose you have this kind of a method. I'm creating an instance, an object of a test base. And there is this line. So when you have this scenario that you have a method that is like this, and you want to step into. So when you're stepping into, the JVM is not going to look through this. It will only and only cater for the method references. It will only cater for the next method reference, which is maybe if I can say test base new test base dot go to, okay, sorry. So dot go to login page dot go to that. So that it is going to look through only and only method references. Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about that. So for that, thank you for watching the video, and I hope this is going to be useful in lifetime programming, and in debugging will increase the time, especially when you are trying to debug some of the methods that are a little bit complex. Debugging skill is very important in a day-to-day environment, a day-to-day development, and it's a skill. Thanks to Joseph, my mentor, who has been, whom we've been learning these techniques together. We talked about print line statements. Print line statements are also good, but they only have one disadvantage, that you cannot look through each method reference, but you can only run line by line execution. Thank you and have a nice time.